Om Purusham Artam Shunyanam Gunanam Pratiprasavaha. Koivaya Swarupa Pratistam Vachati Shakti iti. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. That primordial power, with her Shakti power and prana, returns transmigrating consciousness to its ultimate source, stripping away name, form, time, and space as she does so. And then the soul attains to its final emancipation. Om peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bunaktu, Sahaviryam Karabo Vahai, Tejasvi Navaditamastu Mavidvi Shovahai. Om Shantihi, Shantihi, Shantihi. May Brahman, divine reality, protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the teachings, or with what we study. And may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. Now we can pick up our class series, the second in part 2 of the subject of karma and how prana works in and mantra works in neutralizing, attenuating, equalizing, even outright destroying all karmas from the past, and particularly those negative ones which are arising in mind in daily life, and particularly in those beings who aren't protected by the practice of mantra. So it's a great boon and a great wonder that the soul will all of a sudden awaken to and intuit the self within and separate it out from what Vedanta calls the body-mind mechanism, and therefore have a method to practice in life to keep it protected from all of these encroaching problems that seem to come from outside but really have their causes inside. And in that way we've been looking over the last 4 classes, because there was a part 1 to this series, and we're into the second of part 2 series, and there'll be number 3 to finish it, so-called finish it, because we may go on with it after our retreat in a couple weeks on the West Coast. In that way, though, we need to continue on with where we were at last week, which has to be to show this connection between prana and mana, that is the mind and the life force, with this primordial power which I just chanted about, which returns transmigrating consciousness to its source. In other words, if consciousness is associating with the body and senses and so forth, and it's not aware of the flow of prana or life force, or that life force has become dull or scattered or covered, or is experiencing influence of the gunas, spikes and valleys, the different ways in which the father of yoga and Lord Vashishta and other great rishis have explained the problem of unequal or uneven prana, which leads to this problem with the mind. Then you've got that powerful word which we looked at the top of this chart that we've been following, which has to do with manaha, mind, prana, this flow of life force, sambandha, their relationship. So we looked across the top of that chart in last week's class, and I hope you have studied back on that. And you have all of that in mind as we continue on. We probably should do a quick review because we were caught in the middle of one particular chart when we reached the end of our time last week. But you see, we did do enough to work our way across the top of this graph, which is going around in circles. So it started out with food, and we looked at the teachings on the role of food and prana in the spiritual life, how you're to take food consciously, bless it so that it will turn into nectar in your bloodstream instead of poison, which it's doing for people who don't have that connection to where prana is supposed to flow along opened channels called nadis, and also what it's supposed to affect. It's supposed to give you, as this chart says, some strength in the matter. And strength of body will then, at that point, add to strength of mind, which we will encounter along the way of this chart. So with food, then you're supposed to get this mukhya prana, which is healthy energy. We see that happening to some people. Younger people rather have that mukhya prana already manifesting, although, as I mentioned last week, when I was in high school, and then 20 years later when I saw people that I had known in high school, they had seemed to me that they had lost their connection to that mukhya prana. They weren't healthy, and their minds were brooding, worrying, and their bodies were having disease come, and they were relying too much on medicines and various things like that. Also maybe falling into the control of occult and psychic powers. So that was observing over decades how I saw that happen. And then some certain fads had come along around food. And then some fads had come around yoga too, like hatha. And those things were also not benefiting people and were causing their minds to think, I'm the body, instead of I'm the Atman, which yoga and Vedanta want you to think. So this happens to all come with this consciousness of food, and we want to look at that. We finished half of the chart that showed that there was a deep dive into ignorance and into the lower patalas, if you want to call it that, which proves again that hell can be right here on earth as well as heaven, as people are experiencing low runs of consciousness and lack of prana and diseases and suffering. This is also one of the subjects that the seers here on earth will help you look into, and hopefully in an enlightened way, so that you're not exacerbating the problem, but you're finding solutions for it. So if you go along the top of this chart, and I want to comment quickly on what we said last week, there was food leading to strength, as you can see there along the top row, the top nadi, if you want to call it that, leading to increased stamina of the body, and the ability then to master your posture, and then to purify the senses, and then figure out what pranayama really is, equalize your breathing, the three parts of your breath. And all of this has to do with a purificatory process leading to the discovery of prana, which I hope to get into this class. But just as you see the approach to that along this path of manaha, prana, sambandha, the relationship between mind and prana, then you have to see that it's based early on, at least in people who haven't already mastered these things in a previous lifetime, and they come to earth and maybe they begin to intuit that that there's a higher path to follow, and that maybe there's problems here in relativity that are being covered over by society and upbringing and so forth, and that should be encountered right away when the soul finds itself in the body with a body-mind mechanism, also called psychophysical being in Vedanta. So they've pointed this out with words like this one, Manaha Prana Sambandha. These are very powerfully loaded 3-word phrases that you put into one word to indicate and point to, so that it would grab our attention, and we could then ask the question, do I have that? Have I connected my life force to my mind? Because if I did, according to the seers and the way that they discuss and teach, transmit these methods, then my life should be balanced. I should be in yoga, and I should have yogic equilibrium, and I should have it all the time, and I shouldn't be falling in and out of it, because that's spiked prana, where sometimes you feel good, another day you don't. Sometimes it's called vikshepa or vikshipta in yoga, and it leads to that kind of mind that is off again, on again. So food, strength, increase stamina, master your posture, and purify the senses and equalize the breathing. So some people talked about last week the purification of the senses. How does that really happen? You, like Captain Bligh, take your eyeball out of your head and polish it off, and therefore purify your eye, as we sometimes joke about. Actually, to purify the senses means to make them see Brahman everywhere. So if you go back a few steps here, increase stamina and master your posture. So to master your posture, that's called tantric asana, not hatha yoga. So you want to replace hatha yoga with tantric asana. For instance, when I was doing asana back when I was in my 20s, then I was taught to sit in a position and think Om Mano Na Buddhi, Na Sharum, Na Indriyam, Na Tanmatram, Na Deham, Na Bhutani, Na Bhutapanchakam. I'm not the mind, I'm not the senses, I'm not the body, I'm not the 5 elements. That's what you think when you're in asana, but I've observed hatha yoga classes where people say, okay, let's do the stretch, now feel that tension, feel that body. And so you begin to feel pain and pleasure through your hatha yoga asanas. Why should you do that? You should not be feeling the body at all. In tantric asana, you do not think I am the body. Why would yoga preach that you're the body, and then higher yoga preach I'm not the body? That's a contradiction. So you start off doing your asana tantrically. You slip into it. And you just put your body into it because your body's under your control, and then you think, I'm not the body, I'm not the senses, I'm not the mind. This is what your mind is doing. This is called manasana. This is what your mind is thinking. You're not feeling the body. You don't want to feel the body. So that's wrong instruction from people who are so-called hatha yoga instructors nowadays. And the same is true when you breathe. You don't think, oh, doesn't that feel good, or that doesn't, I'm out of breath, those kinds of things. You think when you breathe in, I am Brahman. When you hold the breath, you think, I will always be Brahman. And when you breathe out, you think, I am not the world, I'm not the body. So and that's called, by the way, Vedic pranayama. So you want to replace this whole hatha yoga regimen that you've gotten into with bad instructions with tantric asana and Vedic pranayama, because you're not the body. The body has been your problem since you were born. From cradle to the grave, my teacher used to say, the penultimate problem that you have is body consciousness. And it's the first teaching. It's 101 yoga, it's even 101 Vedanta and 101 Tantra. So why would you want to feel the body? You want to transcend the body and get into your subtle body and purify that. That's called psychic prana, and then reach higher levels of consciousness. And then pretty soon you'll be in the body but not of it. Why don't we use that phrase, since you're supposed to be in the world with not of it? Like Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna noticed him. Oh, he walks around. He had hair at that time, so his hair was tousled. And his clothes were unkempt and sort of loosely fitting around his body, and his eyes were always looking off into the distance. Sri Ramakrishna said, like a mother bird hatching her eggs. So he wasn't aware of the body at all. He looked in the mirror one time, someone saw him and looked at his body and then told him, I look away and I forget what the body looks like. So he didn't have body consciousness. He was living in the body, but he was not the body. And so the true life he had was in his purified mind, the mind that was connected to the prana. And so that's the way to conduct yourself along this path of Tantra and Veda. And it's true yoga. It's Patanjali's eight-limbed yoga. The sutras of yoga never mention anything about various kinds of asanas you're supposed to get into and feel. You get into those asanas naturally, you sit there naturally, and then you tell yourself that you're the Atman, that you're Brahman. And when you do, you don't say, I'm the lungs, I'm the lungs. You say, you breathe in and say, I'm connecting the prana to the mind. From the physical body to the mind is the involutionary process that you do. If you're a sincere aspirant that wants to make headway spiritually, make a little bit of substantial spiritual growth in this lifetime, rather than just go from lifetime to lifetime thinking you're the body and never knowing about the prana or the psychic prana which conducts your thoughts. And it conducts your thoughts to higher places. We'll look at some of Pipalada's teachings today. Hopefully he's a great rishi for that kind of realization. So that can be, as it were, some of my final comments that I didn't say last week about this food, strength, stamina, posture, breathing set of methods that you follow. And talking about purifying the senses is in there, and there were some questions about that. So you want to then bring consciousness with the prana to your senses. It goes both ways. It goes up into the mind as far as psychic prana and helps your meditations. It goes out into your senses and body and into the world to reveal Brahman everywhere there. Reveal the light which is behind everything. Like I said, mano na buddhi na shariram na tanmatram na kosham na deham na bhutani na bhuta panchakam. I am none of those things. That means mind, senses, elements, subtle senses, gross elements, sheaths, nor body. Aham kritas chapi. I'm not the ego either. Vyat swarupakam. I'm the essence of all of those. So aham kritas chapi vyat swarupakam. Tam isham atmanam, he goes on. Let's see, Shankara says Shankara. Tam isham atmanam. I am the Atman. I am my own ideal. Upuiti shashvatam. Undivided, ever free and never bound. So this is what you think when you put your mind in an asana after you've placed the body in an asana, because it's just simply a slave to you, slave to the mind. It's supposed to do what you tell it to. And then you forget it. And you go beyond even mind into connecting, discovering this prana and connecting it deeper and deeper into the causes of things. Not only the causes of your problems, your karmas and all that, which you're going to get to mantra pretty soon for that, but now you've made a connection of the prana shakti that's here, and you've asked her to come and help you and connect these things and lead you to an inner life. How can you have an inner life if you're simply obsessed with the body, the senses, and its objects? Pain and pleasure is the round there that comes and goes. Dvandva mohena, deluding pairs of opposites, Krishna calls that. So you want this eventually to open up the third eye. We'll get to that as we go along here. Open up some inner senses. But in the meantime, you're purifying senses. So let's look at, just take a Vedic look, a Vedantic look at what that means to purify the senses. In our limited time we have in these classes, we go through as much of this as we possibly can. Well, there you can see the Jnana Chakshu is the title of this particular teaching chart, the wisdom eye. And it has to do with gross, subtle, and causal sight. So Shankara says here, the world is nothing but Brahman, because Brahman is the only reality. See this always with your spiritual eye, and with an unruffled mind, and in all circumstances. For what is there to be seen here by the eye, other than the mere objects of the senses? In like manner, to that one who knows Brahman, what is there to be seen here at all, wherever the intellect may play or wander, except divine reality? So this is the conclusion of great non-dual seers, Advaitic seers, that the thing to really be seeing here is not objects with your gross eyes, but you're going to have to develop and purify those senses and take them to their subtle equivalents, like tanmatras, take them to causal equivalents, like the inner senses, the indriyas. And so this is what is shown in this diagram below. You see on one side, there, of course, in the middle, there's this third eye, the Jnana Chakshu. And if it's looking down, as Sri Ramakrishna said, if the eyes are in the center of the forehead, he said, but why do they always look down to the enjoyments of the senses and the sense objects? It's in the third eye. It's in the third eye region between the eyebrows. It should be looking in or higher. So why those gross subtles, they're defective by nature, so you want to purify them. So he says there, the eyes are in the center of the forehead, but their gaze is always fixed upon the three lower centers, where eating, drinking, and sex life are enjoyed. So it implies that maybe back to food, that when you eat food, at the beginning of the chart we're studying right now, is that should be done pure, with pure food. Samprasad it's called, in a pure mood, and anaprasad, with pure food, in order to get strength and stamina out of it. That comes next, right? So you can see the person who is paying attention to their food is thinking about getting strength and stamina out of it so that they can purify the outgoing, downward-facing senses that are always fixed on their objects. So that's a kind of purity. I must say here that purity in Indian darshanas is about being close to the source. And then they call that Shuddha, but Shuddha, they call that mixed, pure and impure. So that's a little further away from the source. And then finally, Ashuddha is as far away from the source as it can get. That's the body, the senses, the objects, the physical world. That's very far away from the source. So that's what they mean by pure, mixed, pure and impure. I actually have a chart on that I can flash at you here. But let's finish this one, because we're talking about the subtle senses within you and how do they get purified. So you can see on the left-hand side there, Sri Krishna, whose teaching this is in the Gita, he says, sees and utilizes the gross senses in the right way. So that means this open eye of wisdom. Smelling, tasting, seeing, feeling, and hearing are the gross senses. They're called the indriyas. The Gyanendriyas actually sometimes are labeled because they should be seeking knowledge out of everything. So that's actually another way to purify the senses, is to turn them away from objects of pleasure and turn them onto gaining knowledge. That may be in this case still lower knowledge, or what they call aparavidya, like what you use for your occupation, your job and everything, but it's sure a lot sight better than fixing them on objects for pleasure alone and then having pain come at you in return. So this third eye, if it's open, also sees and utilizes the subtle senses: odor, flavor, visibility, tangibility, and audibility. So this power in the senses goes inward. So you can probably, if you want a proof for that, would be your dream state, they say, is that you have senses in your dream state. And those are after these five senses, gross senses, have been turned off. You shut your eyes to go to sleep. Your ears don't function anymore. You're not smelling odors with your nose, or tasting with your mouth, or feeling with your hands or feet. So those gross senses got turned off, you went into dream, and then you found yourself in a dream body with subtle senses. And because we're not taught about the nature of dream in Western psychology, but we're taught about it in yoga, Eastern psychology, then we know that our consciousness has actually lifted off of the gross things and gone to the subtle realm. That means they've left, their attention has been taken off of the physical material world, and it's been placed on the subtle world. The physical body has been renounced and discarded, at least temporarily, and then now you're in your subtle body called Sukshma Sharira. And this is where the senses take on this subtle sense. And of course, then there's this deeper cause to them. You see, number 3 there says, sees and utilizes the causal senses. That is the very property of solidity, liquidity, luminosity, homogeneity, and all-pervasiveness. This is at the deepest level of things, that you see and utilize causal senses. That would be like in your deep sleep state, if you wanted an analogy for that. So the non-dualists who make these great statements, I'm not the body, and I'm not the mind, but I'm the Atman, are talking about these 3 bodies that you have in which consciousness jumps to in 3 different states. Svapna, Shushupti, and so forth. That is Jagrat, Svapna, and Shushupti. Consciousness is moving inward all the time and coming back out all the time. If you talk about that over a long period of time, Kala or Kalas, you're talking about how involution and evolution works. And you can talk about it over a series of yugas, or you could talk about it even over a 24-hour period at night, how consciousness is making these moves. Via what? It's riding the prana inward, and it's riding the prana back out. It operates with the gross prana outside, and then with the subtle prana inside, and the psychic prana deeper. So that's symbolized by Lord Vishnu riding Garuda. If you've seen those images, there's a dragon bird there called Garuda. Vishnu is sitting on its back, steering it to different realms, into different worlds. Like he wants to give a vision of himself to someone, all of a sudden there will be, riding the prana, will be Vishnu showing himself to his devotee, because his devotee is meditating on him as his Ishtam. So prana meets psychic prana, and then it sees a higher realm. Then they part. Consciousness returns to its lower realm again and comes out here and sees a picture of Vishnu riding Garuda. So whatever the case may be, the senses in 3 levels of senses here get fixed upon reality, and that's how they're purified. Like I say, it's not like washing out your eyes with solution or taking a cotton swab and getting your ears clean. That's just all on the physical level. This is how to purify the senses on this chart we're looking at. Of course, these great souls are already pure. They come here with pure minds and pure senses. That's on the other side of this chart. You see, basically, it's called avinashyatam. Avinashyantam, sees reality as imperishable. So Sri Krishna is talking about those beings who have arrived here with their inner eye open. And they're seeing these 3 states, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, as 3 modes of the same consciousness without divisions. So avinashyantam sees reality as imperishable. In other words, changeless, indestructible. There's different words he uses for that in the Gita. And sarvatra samavatistam. Atistam means to be steady or equal. So these great souls also see reality dwelling equally everywhere. So this is the advantage of having the 3rd eye open, as opposed to it not opening at all because the prana hasn't been connected to the mind. And in the middle, it opens sometimes and then it closes again. You might call that waking, dreaming, deep sleep in the ordinary sense. When you're awake, you know very little about inner life. When you dream, you're getting a hint. When you're in deep sleep, you're close. You're hand in glove, close to Brahman when you're in deep sleep. And you feel great when you wake up out of it. So there's these ways of talking about the already purified senses that the souls have when they come here. Is why they don't make mistakes, get attached to objects, seek pleasure and suffer pain later. There's a whole host of things they don't do that ordinary people are doing. And then, of course, as we looked at last week, a whole host of things that people are taking deep dives into ignorance and Maya through. We'll look at the rest of that chart in a second. But I wanted to let you know that the third eye isn't just some sort of Indian philosophical phenomena. It's been found in many, many other religions, this center, this very deep center which moves inward. And that's at the lower part of this chart, where I've put religious references to the eye of wisdom. Christianity, for instance. If thine eye be made single, thou shalt know the truth. So Jesus was obviously and evidently aware of this inner eye that he could look through to see Brahman, or see the Almighty Lord or Spirit, and then look out of it again and see the world with pure eyes. Sri Ramakrishna called those love eyes and love ears, that if Brahman visits consciousness and consciousness makes a return visit to Brahman, then it gets colored, as we said yesterday at Satsang and God Blogs, that it's like putting on colored glasses. You see everything that color, like blue glasses or yellow glasses. But Samadhi makes you put on Brahman colored glasses. And so you come out of that and you look at objects and you see the object as Brahman, and not as an object to possess, not as an object to get pleasure from, not as an object to suffer by because it gets decayed or destroyed or lost or stolen. You get the idea here. So there's how consciousness gets itself colored or flavored by Brahman, not just by Maya. So Jesus was obviously aware of that. Hinduism says, they who perceive with the eye of wisdom, they truly see. Devoting themselves to wisdom, they are neither born at the time of creation, nor are they disturbed at the time of dissolution. But the deluded do not see me as I depart, stay, and enjoy. Only they truly see who possess the inner eye of wisdom. Sri Krishna in the Gita. Om ekramantam stitam vapi bunjanam, he says in the Sanskrit. Vimudam nanupashanti jnana chakshushaha is the Sanskrit. So they do not see, the deluded do not see those who do not see me, who arrive, depart, and remain. That's why I didn't finish up above, but this refers to those who see the Lord in the living, in the dying, and in those who are being born again. He sees the same consciousness in those who are passing away, in those who are arriving back into a baby's body, and to those who are sporting in the body in between those two bardos, if you want to use Tibetan Buddhism and its way of speaking. So then he finishes it off saying, only they truly see me who possess this inner eye of wisdom. Jnanam chakshushaha, they see with that inner eye. So it's very beautiful, and it's there in different religious traditions. Like in Kundalini Yoga, it's said, as Kundalini traverses the sixth center, or lotus, called the Agya Chakra, that's here, currents of refined prana rise high. So think back to this chart we were just looking at, how you want to get food together, get stamina, get your posture mastered so you're straight and not thinking of the body. You want to purify your senses, you want to equalize your breathing, and then prana all of a sudden becomes available to you consciously. Other people are just using prana here and there randomly, and so they're getting random effects back from it. So Kundalini Yoga then tells us visions, light, intervals, Internal sounds are experienced, and the mind gets so absorbed that it loses normal consciousness. So that's Kundalini Yoga's reference to the Jnana Chakshu. In Buddhism, Lord Buddha was heard to say, I have the true Dharma hidden in my wisdom eye. That's in the Dhammapada. I have the true Dharma hidden in my wisdom eye. So he's aware of this very powerful center. Taoism puts it this way, the eyes are the windows to the soul, but between the two windows is the main door to divinity. Enter there to discover your inner divine nature. Lao Tzu was known to have said that. These two windows, like the diagram up above, they can look out, they can look in, and they can also transcend. Because between them, those two physical eyes is this doorway to divinity. That's beautifully put in Taoism. Confucianism puts it this way. 3 persons are walking together. Who is the master? They all have 2 eyes, but the divine third eye is the master of all of them. So Confucius must have gotten very influenced too by the Vedicists, the Tantricists, and the Buddhists who came into the picture there. Don't want to forget Gnosticism. It says the true gate is also the door to one's divine nature. It is the front door to heaven. It is located neither left nor right, nor up nor down. It is right in the center, and thus is called the door to divinity, the white sun. And I used to hear that called the white dove ascending in the Christian tradition sometimes. The white dove ascending. Sometime when you'd be contemplating or meditating, and all of a sudden this doorway would open. It'd be like a perfectly cylindrical sun, shining with light, but not the light of the sun, moon, stars, lightning, or even prana, but with the light of consciousness that was constant and eternal, birthless and deathless, changeless and transcendent. So there's a good 6 or 7 references to the eye of wisdom and how important it is in other religious traditions, not just in Vedanta and Tantra. So going back up to the right-hand side of this chart to finish it out, that means number 2, you see that Sarvatra Samavatistam sees reality dwelling equally and everywhere. And as I was saying earlier, the seer sees that in the living, in the dying, and in those being born. Sees the same consciousness. How is that important? Because people who are attending upon a dying soul don't know what to say to them. I've got that all the time from people. My grandmother's dying, my father's dying, or my child has a disease and they're about to pass away. What do I say to them? So the divine soul sees nothing's happening there. There's one consciousness remaining steady, and it appears to be dying, it appears to be being reborn, and it appears to even be living. If the mana and the prana are connected early on in life, which the children should be taught, then they're living an eternal life the whole time. And when they pass into earth, say like Thich Nhat Hanh did last week, or say like our friend and in Honolulu a couple days ago, his name was Lama Rinchen. He passed away too. So he was there under the auspice of Kalu Rinpoche, who was one of the Tibetan teachers here in Hawaii that came through. He had Lama Tenzin start a center there in Honolulu that lasted for decades. And so he just passed away. So you've got these people who are illumined souls who are taking on bodies and giving them up, but they see that they never change. They're always Buddha nature, or they're always the Atman. And then they're also seeing people passing and coming. But Krishna says, those others that were deluded, they don't see me arriving, departing, and staying. They don't see the one consciousness that doesn't change in those who are being born, in those who are living, and in those who are passing. So they haven't connected early in life the mind to the prana and the prana to the mind. and used that to uncover the psychic prana, to uncover the Atman, their true nature. See? So this is why some people are born with that third eye already well matured and seeing everything as it should be seen, like a yogi sees it. Other people, they do not see me, the deluded, who don't have this jnana chakshu. So it's a very beautiful study. And finally, prakriti, karma, kriyamanani, it says here, sees that nature performs all action while the soul remains actionless. So that would be something that might be a little bit too late to tell your dying grandfather or grandmother that, if you've uncovered it in your young life, which hopefully you have. But you could tell them that you are unchanging, you see. You are actionless. You are perfect. Nature is doing all this. So you thought you were the body, you thought you were the senses, you thought you were the objects, but you were thinking incorrectly all this time. You are really the changeless essence behind them. Vyat Swarupakam. Not the mind, ego, or any of those. I am Vyat Swarupakam, and I am the essence in those things, not the things themselves. So that would be something to tell people early on. Might be at the time of their passing, if they haven't had training, it might not go far, but nevertheless it will be the truth that you're telling them. So you can see how this chart on the wisdom eye that I put together, partly from teachings in the Gita, others from teachings in the Vedanta, and also these references I looked for in different religions, is a very powerful thing to think about in terms of purifying the senses. And how that isn't just, washing out your eyes or brushing your teeth or taking a salt nasal solution into the nose and thinking that that's going to purify the senses. That's just the body. The senses may already be pure. You just need to connect the prana to the mind to find out about this. So that's one way of completing up this first line as we come to the prana and move into it. And for that, it's a positive note we put upon this chart that we were looking at last week, and that we can continue on with here. So, because for the third eye, I was going to explain it musically too. They sing here about that as well. Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. Mantui dek arami deke. Mantui dek arami reke. Arjano ke unahi deke. Jatone hridaye reko adarini shamamake. This is Kamalakanta, one of our favorite Bengali songwriters. He sings, "O blissful mind, awaken to the enchanting vision of Mother Shama." That is this mother who directs the prana through her Shakti power. How to do that? By opening your eye of wisdom. To see, you see. Abiding in that exalting condition, perceive the form of her form enshrined eternally within your heart. You're going to have to do that to get to the heart chakra, you see, to awaken the mind to the presence of lower three chakras to the heart chakra. So he's talking about that here. And it continues, withdraw into that sacred chamber of ecstatic love and behold her there in secret. And then in that exalted condition, remember that the ordinary mind connected to the five senses cannot enter there. So all of this is about a person who has reached that inner vision of Mother Shakti by the connecting of the prana to the mind, and is now trying to sing it to those people who haven't made that connection yet and who are in a very dire strait because of that. So this is all connected to remembering the divine self within you, but there are methods to use to cause that remembrance to come forward, that divine memory. They call it Daiva Smriti. And to sidestep that Vismriti, that forgetfulness of all of this that happened to you in previous lives, you have to remember all these things, practice them again, keep your mind deeply ensconced in them, as he says here, abide in that exalted condition. Once you find it, follow through with it. So beautiful songs like that are sung in the tradition. I mean, turn the page, there's another one. Kali Kali Bo Nashana Kali Kali Bo Shana Karapada Jan Namamritapam Karapada Jan Namamritapam Yadihate Pran Take Rashana Kali Kali Bo Rashana Kali Kali Bo Rashana. Just like this first line of our chart says, O blissful self, caught in mundane diversions and vain pursuits, utter the sweet and powerful name of Kali. And that's the mantra, we're getting to that. Who is the divine mother of this entire universe. Grasp the non-dual knowledge of her wisdom feet with the strength of your subtle insight, that's opening this third eye. Then meditate deeply on her all-encompassing, all-pervasive presence. And that's prana and her prana shaktis. At that auspicious moment, when the desire for liberation arises within you, imbibe the nectar of Kali's timeless awareness and taste immortality. So that song segues nicely to finish up this chart which we started last week. Let's look at that. Because, and keep in mind, at that auspicious moment, when the desire for liberation arises within you, that line, keep in mind as we look back on this chart, because we already saw what happens when you don't connect the prana to the mind, most people. Basically, severed connection between prana and mind, life force moves unevenly, the nerves and the nadis close down on you, you get lethargy of the body and dullness of the senses, you lose discrimination around how to eat proper food, then there's loss of interest in physical exercise and keeping fit, then the breakdown of the natural immune systems happen. Balance of in-breath, suspended breath, and out-breath get compromised. Thinking process becomes easily confused. Violent acts are then perpetrated due to the erratic prana. Mind gets imbalanced and loses conscience and memory. Life is beset with doubt, fear, guilt, and remorse. Both body and brain become subject to fear, guilt, and remorse. Body and brain become subject to multiple diseases, and then death and rebirth and ignorance takes place. We looked at all of that last week. Not a happy tale, is it? But we see this happening to many people. They call this the ocean of suffering, or the influence of Maya. So having seen that, then we probably want to understand that this all happened back when we weren't taught how to connect our life force to our mind, because we didn't get the right intention around eating food and getting strong. Or we ate food like meat and so forth just to get a strong body so that we could lift weights or go to the Olympics or whatever it is, or we could run a long time and so forth. We were concentrated on the body's strength, not the strength of the mind leading to the Atman. So that's what this chart is called. Subtitled there is, weakness and its concomitants. How about the strengths then? We want to look at them. In accord with that line of the song I just sang, when that auspicious moment, when the desire of liberation arises within you, imbibe the nectar of timeless awareness. So that's really the very first thing here on the right-hand side of the chart understood. Soul intuits the need to purify the physical nadis. That's that auspicious moment. You remember it when you were younger and you got dissatisfied with upbringing, schooling, Western military, politics, things that we all complained about that didn't seem right to us at all, that people were falling into left and right without questioning. And there were some people that questioned, so they started looking for a better lifestyle. Later we were to call that a yogic lifestyle. And yoga here means the inner 8 limbs of yoga, the psychological yoga, how to awaken to that. And as we see here soon, find a teacher, get a mantra, and go on this yogic path that we're describing right now. So if you can remember back then, when you began to intuit the need to purify your physical nadis and lift yourself out of the body's preoccupations, you've probably started doing it, according to teachers, with conscious breathing, exercise, and sattvic food. That animates the prana, and remember we were calling that mukhya prana. There's just a basic prana that's there. Maybe look next week at the 5 types of prana and the 5 types of psychic prana. I can show you. But basically right now we're just talking about prana as an overall motivator and animator towards higher things. And that's when the conscious breathing comes in very importantly. Like I said, if you're taught early to connect to 3 breaths, because they're not equaled, so you breathe in equally, you hold equally, and you breathe out equally, because maybe you're not doing that in everyday life. But at the same time, you're supposed to hold a general manasana, or a mental perspective about breathing in, I am Atman, holding the breath, I will always be Atman, expelling the breath, I'm not the world, I'm not the body. This is how to the mind set in which to equalize those 3 movements of the breath. This is what you tell the mind when you're using the lungs and trying to equalize the breathing process. Puraka, Kumbhaka, Raichakat. Breathe in and teach those who are in your asana class or doing pranayama, the Advaitic way of doing things, the healthiest way of doing things, because there's more to come. After you equalize the breathing, then the external senses become pure and connect to the inner senses. So you can see how in this chart we're studying how to purify the senses. The prana will do that for you if you use it consciously, and it won't if you don't use it and connect it. That's where senses become impure. When it gets better is when there's an inner prana, psychic prana. They're called prana shaktis, and there are numbers of them in the process. The Divine Mother Shakti, Mahamaya, uses these prana shaktis, if you've studied some of the Kundalini yoga system, to open up channels into the mind and into higher mind. So this is what psychic prana is all about. The prana then has to connect deeper to the prana shaktis who are conducting the flow of thought. And you know, if you use things like, well, I'm getting ahead of myself, but if you use things like studying the scriptures and so forth, that's how you help the psychic prana purify, remain pure. So there are practices you do that will help these different kinds of senses in your three bodies, gross, subtle, and causal, to become pure and remain pure. About the time when you get psychic prana flowing and your thoughts become buoyant, the guru appears in life and mantra diksha is granted. Well, why wasn't he there or she there earlier, you might ask yourself, because you weren't qualified and ready yet to hear the teachings. When your psychic prana awakens, you'll have a natural affinity for the teachings. And this is why some people don't have a natural affinity for the teachings. They can come early or prematurely to a Dharma class or hear a teacher. You've seen them by the hundreds and dozens, I'm sure, come and go. But when they have that deeper intuition again and they have an affinity and psychic prana is flowing and they have a deep interest and sincerity in the teachings, then all of a sudden they see the guru. They see the guru for the first time. I've had that happen even myself. Say, people come to me, get these great teachings, and then they say, well, now how do I find a guru? I just kind of chuckle. You see, well, you already found him. Obviously, I'm that. You took the teachings from me. If you want to go somewhere else, fine, but we can go deeper here, you know. And that's what happens here. The practitioner discovers the secret of the scriptures. If people go away because they don't want to learn, they don't want to read, they don't like words, they don't like to study, that's a habit back there when you didn't connect the prana to the mind, isn't it? You had to generate this interest through the prana. If it was dead, if it wasn't moving, you weren't interested in any scripture, Bible, Gita, Quran, or people who just passé. So you don't want to get into that. But here, when the prana is flowing and vibrant, you're really interested in the secrets of the scriptures. I have a whole chart on that, which of course, in our short time, when we're following this trajectory, you can find it in the Footfalls book or look back on the classes. But basically the secrets of the scriptures are like they're eternal. They don't come in time and leave in time. They're eternal truths. And they come from the highest source, down through Ishvara, then down to ancestors, gods, ancestors, humankind. They move from the highest source into that. And there are other secrets to the scriptures, how to look at them, that are what you discover when you find a guru and take the scriptures more seriously. So, of course, that's something that I like to emphasize, but I won't take a lot of time with it here. Then the intellect perceives its connection to Mother Wisdom. There's a source to the scriptures. Maybe the ultimate secret of the scriptures is that it belongs to Divine Mother, the goddess of the Word. And so if you study them, they will lead you to their author, or authoress in this case. You'll find Divine Mother through that which she loves the most, the words that destroy ignorance. Those are called mantras. Those are called scriptures, slokas, sutras. They're called mahavakyas as the process gets more developed and matured. We were talking about that yesterday at satsang. So words have different levels of them and different amounts of intelligence in them, and she's the one that's conducting them all. So those two are very important. You would have never known them if you left the prana disconnected from the mind. That's kind of what the point we're trying to make, and recall again and again, why are we suffering the left-hand side of this chart? Why aren't we realizing the right-hand side of this chart? This is the whole reason that we put it together. For this Sanskrit word, manaha prana sambandha, says it all. What's in a word? How about that word? You're seeing what's in that word right here. After the intellect perceives its connection to Mother Wisdom, it finds out that it's really not just a holder of intelligence called an intellect, buddhi. It's actually intelligence itself, and it flows like prana. So this is how psychic prana becomes intelligence, mother intelligence, how it leads to it. Then Shakti power inundates the body-mind mechanism. It flows through everything, that Shakti power, which is how I started out this class. Purusham, Artam, Gunanam, Shunyanam, Prati Prashavaha. The last sutra of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the father of yoga, is saying here that the Purusha gets led back to its ultimate source through this Divine Mother Shakti. And she'll strip away name and form and time and space and then introduce it to its nameless, formless, timeless, spaceless essence. Koivaya Purusha Pratistam. It'll then be Pratista, steady in its Purusha, in liberation, in a liberated state, Koivaya. Father of Yoga had it pegged just right. And so there's your true yoga. When a soul gets inundated with Shakti power, selfless works and individual sadhana ripen. Meditation matures to reveal the truth of unity, the oneness of all things. So that's where your meditations get very much aided and benefited by your previous studies and by Mother Intelligence and by your practice individually, called sadhana. It's rust of societies. That's called lethargy, you see. And rust of monasteries is called lack of recitation of wisdom scriptures. Rust of households is called lack of spiritual practice, said the Buddha when he was alive. Then the soul has open darshan with higher powers and the ishtam. So it has, darshan means communion with its true self. Its true self first has a supreme form called ishtam. In India that would be Divine Mother, Paramashiva, Mahavishnu, Sri Krishna, and so forth. These are the highest forms of your own consciousness. And they will then open further inward to Brahman. They're doorways. So one has darshan with them, but cannot do so if it doesn't connect the prana to the mind. I keep bringing that back, so we'll stay with the main point of this chart. Then they sport. And neutralization, destruction of primal karmas ensues. So that's where you get to these karmas from past lifetimes that are hidden inside the mind that cause samskaras. And if you're just feeling the body, as they say in asana, or you're just like breathing to have some sort of feeling from pranayama, then that's not going to happen. The soul has to get deep to the primal karmas and with this psychic prana, burn them out, neutralize them, at least attenuate them, and maybe just destroy them outright so they will not come back again next lifetime, as they are doing with so many people who are born with the problems that exacerbate, like on the left-hand side of this chart. That's where the gunas get mastered and transcended. So there we have Tri-guna-tita. See, they call that in Sanskrit. The three gunas of tamas, rajas, and sattva. That is lethargy, so well listed here, and rajas, the restlessness that ensues on the mind that isn't peaceful, and then balance, sattva, which should lure the soul into intuiting a better way, a higher way. I think that first point is all important right now in a society and a world and a yuga that it is right now, is that that questioning about who am I and so forth, the very basic part of that question is meant to get you to move into having an inner life. And without that, then life amounts to nothing. Sri Ramakrishna said that in the Gospel. That one is born to no purpose who, having been given the boon of a human body, is not able to realize God in this lifetime. So as soon as the soul finds itself in a human body, that question ought to arise. How can I make the most of this birth? As Holy Mother told us when she was alive, the devotees of Sri Ramakrishna have not come here to enjoy, to party, as it were, you see. They've come here because they know gaining a body is very auspicious, and that they can do a lot towards realization of the self through using this body in the proper way, through using food. And last week, remember I told you, pure food gives you pure blood gives you pure mind gets you pure thought, and pure thought, pure mind is the Atman. That's the very thing you're seeking. So she had teachings like that to encourage the soul to awaken, as these songs have been telling us. And then when that moment of liberation arises within you, abide in that and taste the nectar of immortality, the song sings. So when the gunas get mastered and transcended, you have a very fully realized soul there who isn't going to be pulled back into the projection of the mind, of the collective mind, as they've transcended the very gunas themselves. And that's back, of course, to what Krishna was telling us earlier, is that they don't see me who come and depart and stay because I'm veiled by the gunas of nature. So people go to nature rather than to the source of nature when they appear in a body with senses and objects. Nature, nature. They run to that, but they never ask themselves, and intuit this deeper presence behind everything. The Brahman behind the Maya, and behind nature. And finally, the final point here on this chart, mind gains full illumination and merges into Brahman. And of course, then that will be samadhi time, or sometimes they call that nirvana, or as I was just saying, kaivalya. In that way, then you have reached, and we already then talked about prana, purity, purify the prana, control the prana, raise the prana, frequent holy company, select a guru, and secure a mantra. So that has put us right here at this juncture of mantra. So I'll end the class with that now that we've made a quick pass through prana, and it's led us to the possibility of giving a mantra. So 2 weeks ago, or in the final series, the final class of the first series, remember those classes we looked at the 21 points of mantra practice in 4 phases, each phase presided over by one of the Divine Mother aspects. So that was a 21 point divided into 4, and then divided into another 4 as the presiding deities over that practice of mantra. If you can look back on that and check your own mantra practice with it, then you're on a good course there. You're following more the right-hand side of that chart we just looked at. Here, though, as we have entered the realm of prana leading to guru, leading to mantra, because these things can happen in a little different order, depending on the individual practitioner and on the character and nature, also on the karmas that are present or not present, as the case may be. Then you have reached a place where possibly you might want to look at these universal or fundamental facts about the mantra. We'll take the remaining few minutes just to look at that. You can see the top quote there is by the Holy Mother, our own Ishtam here. God cannot be realized through japa, worship, and meditation. God is only realized through His grace. Nonetheless, one must perform japa and meditation, for they can remove the impurities of one's mind, God's grace then becomes revealed. It falls along the line of the wind of God's grace is always blowing, but you must raise your sail to catch it. So, and you could say the same about the self. That self is, Brahman, is one and in everything, but it's covered over by things like the gunas on the cosmic level, and by things like collective and individual karma on the individual and collective level of souls. So that's why they don't see the Lord in everything, see the Lord coming and going in the living and the dying and so forth, because the prana is not flowing and it hasn't opened the wisdom eye so that they can see these things concretely as the truth, and then they'll know the difference between the real and the unreal, as Vedanta says. So mantra here, you can see, is the science of cosmic sound. Through the science of mantra, the Kundalini will awaken. Repetition of God's name will lead to the goal. So in accordance with Holy Mother's saying above, you have to do it, because then it'll purify the mind. Then the mind will see that the Atman is the reality. The Atman is always the reality, it's just been covered over. So these facts we can go through fairly quickly. It's Vedic in origin. That is, the rishis of ancient Vedic times practiced mantra and other austerities to realize God. And it is a practice that's unique among spiritual practices. As you remember that chart on Jnana-Chakshu, the third eye, just showed an hour ago or so, that's accepted by 7 different religions we saw. In the same way, you'll find this mantra in almost every religion. Such is the power of the mantra that, in addition to the mind, it also purifies the body. And that was a teaching I got personally from my guru when he gave me the mantra. He said, this will purify your body and senses, and you'll be able to go anywhere with pure mind and pure senses now. Just repeat the mantra. These are all facts about the mantra that are accepted. Is a universal mode of practice. Number 3, people in other countries are also repeating recitation of the Lord's holy names. Sri Sharada Devi said. Is effective as repetition. Even if your mind is not awakened, you must repeat the mantra thousands of times. So these karmas that have embedded themselves in the mind need to be, she said, like pulling threads off of a spool. The soul, the individual soul, has wound good, bad, and mixed karmas on the spool of the mind. Now get a hold of the end of those 3 colors of karma, pull them off until the mind's empty again. And that pulling is done every pull, we might say, or every breath, as the songs are singing to us, needs to be done with the repetition of the holy name to make sure the whole thing gets neutralized and overseen by the Prana Shakti herself. It's very unlikely that an individual soul is going to have the strength to undo their karmas, as we looked at here. That strength has to be rightly oriented, and it has to come off of food, and it has to then gain power, stamina, and then has to purify inwardly the senses and awaken the prana. The mantra is doing this. 5th, originates in the Bodhi mind. After attaining true wisdom, one sees that gods and deities are all in Maya. Of course, these are all quotes from Sri Sharada Devi. Going on to the top of the right-hand column, provides protection during practice. God's name protects. Instead of losing a leg, one might merely suffer a thorn in the foot. Good God blog there for us. Basically, we've used it a little bit, because last week we had that God blog where she said, whatever she writes in the Book of Destiny, she can also erase. So if you're doing your mantra practice, she'll hear you. If you have a certain karma coming up that might cause you some problem in life, with the repetition of mantra, you can reduce it from a wound as wide as a plowshare, she said in Bengali, to a pinprick. That karma that you have coming can be reduced by daily repetition of the mantra. So that's a beautiful factor of the mantra. That's why you should do it every day. You never know when these karmas are going to arise, even if you're a more advanced practitioner. It clears the subconscious mind. Mind becomes pure and the mind still. Man becomes pure and the mind still by repeating the mantra of God, she says. Then a quarter of the mantra is given by the guru at the time of initiation. And later, 3/4 of the mind is hidden as mother's form. So she says the purpose of initiation is to try and realize God through sincere effort. So that's when you get the mantra, you recite it, but that's just 1/4 of the process. Like those 21 points of mantra practice we looked at a few weeks ago, it comes in phases. So when it comes into the second, third, and fourth phase, which she's mentioning here, 3/4 of the mantra is hidden in mother's form. First her outer form, like a picture or an image, then her inner form. When you connect the prana to the mind, you'll start to see her in darshan, right? You'll have vision of her, you'll have dreams of her, and so forth, or whomever your ishtam is. So she says, when a pure soul repeats the mantra, the holy name bubbles up from within. So that's the fourth stage of this, or third stage maybe of this process. And you can see there 2 more quotes we can finish with. It grants knowledge of unity. Man achieves the highest goal through the practice of japa. God has given us fingers that we might be blessed by repeating his name. Be content under all circumstances and repeat his name, she says. Further, mantras are associated with the deities and are innumerable. I mentioned that last week. The Master gave me mantras possessing great power, and all of them are associated with the deities. They are imbued with the power of renunciation. So that's how she strips name and form, karma, and so forth away as she guides the soul inward, deeper, to those souls who are repeating the name of the Lord and using mantra as their method to come to realization of the self. And with that said, and a few charts accomplished, we'll go on towards next week's class where we'll look at this more deeply, at this whole point of getting holy company, finding a guru and selecting a mantra. We'll look deeply into that and how it leads to awakening the psychic prana more specifically. And we will follow that track that says, Monopole Bhajakali Icha Hoi Torjaya Chari Guru Data Mahamantra Divanishi Japa Kori Monopole Bhajakali Icha Hoi Torjaya Chari Guru Data Mahamantra Divanishi Japa Kori Bolo Boli Bhajakali Mono Boli Bhajakali Om Tachnayo Ravrinnimahe Gatum Yagyaya Gatum Yena Pate Daivi Swastarastu Naha Fastir Manushe Byaha Urdvam Jagatu Besajam Sangno Astu Divade Sang Chatushpate Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. May we make a great offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this offering and always worship the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and sustenance also then abide with us. Om peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us. May peace be unto all. Om Hari Om Hari Om. Japa Hari Om Tat Sat.